Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's show, we welcome Josh Simons. Josh is an ASE certified master tech who has several years of experience working in a variety of shops. Josh has since transitioned into becoming an instructor and the academic program director at Greenville Technical College. Welcome to the show, Josh. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, Jay? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing great. I want to start by asking how the transition from being a technician in the industry to being an educator has gone.
Man, the one thing that all my other instructors here have had to tell me constantly my first couple months here is you have to learn to slow down. So coming from you're working on flat rate, trying to turn hours into, much more slow, methodical. How do we build this? How do we craft this so students best understand it? How do we create bugs instead of trying to fix problems? It's a shift in mindset. So
we'll dive a lot more into that because I do know we have a really bad instructor shortage throughout the U.S. So I want to learn more about that. Maybe what was enticing about that opportunity to go that direction. But as a northerner, one thing that I have to ask, how do you say Greenville? Is it, I have to get that down because I always screw it up.
So how is it pronounced or how do I say it?
How do you say it?
So I live in Greenville.
Greenville. Yes. I know I screw it up every single time. And I tried to, at the intro, say it the proper way. And I think I kind of botched it, but I think I was in the general vicinity.
Yeah. Technically it would be Greenville, but I've been down here for 18 years. So I'm from Michigan originally. I've picked up some kind of Southern accent, even though I still say pop instead of soda. So it's Greenville.
Still a bit of northerner in you. So where at in Michigan? Where did you grow up at?
So I grew up Flint suburbs. So I was
All
in
right.
the heart of GM country. All my family grew up. All my family worked for General Motors, Buick. The truck plant was there, and my dad was a design engineer for General Motors. So I guess cars was in the blood here.
So you've really had it from an early age. You've had that exposure to the automotive world from the start.
Yeah, my whole family was. Everyone was automotive from one degree or another.
So what little town is it? Because we have a relatively, I know she'll listen to the podcast, so I'll say relatively famous person within WrenchWay famous on that. If anybody's ever watched our TikTok videos, Val is actually from that general area as well.
Okay, so I grew up in Clio. Which is the northeastern kind of corner of Genesee County where Flint's at. So, but it was rural out there. It wasn't city by any stretch.
Like how many people in Clio?
I don't even remember what population was. It wasn't big. It wasn't like Greenville by any bit at all.
So what took you south? You grew up there. What moved you down to North Carolina?
So in South Carolina.
Sorry, yeah, South Carolina. I said North Carolina. I'm like, as soon as I said that, I'm like, it's actually South Carolina.
Yeah, there's a Greenville, North Carolina too. But anyway, so what moved us south? So, so I got married. We moved in 2005. I got married in 2004. My wife, her family was moving up from Florida. And they were moving to Greenville, and I was working in a factory, and I wanted to go back to college, and Greenville Tech had an automotive program, and I thought, oh man, just thinking very pragmatically, cars are always going to need to be fixed. There's a job there. So, and then we wanted to be part of a church down here as well. So between family church and education, everything kind of landed us here in Greenville.
Very cool. And so you go through the program at the school
Mhm.
and you start off as a tech. How was your experience when you first got into industry?
It was harsh. um, I remember my first day on the job. The service writer or not, that the service manager gathering everybody up and just laying into everybody about, they needed to work harder, they needed to turn their radios up and crank it out so they would move faster. And I'm like, I my first day on the job, like I showed up with a tiny little um, Craftsman blow molded, suitcase of tools I got from Sears, and I'm like, I'm what am I doing? But it took a little bit to even out when I got
So
there.
that first day, talk about the intimidation there, because that is something that I think a lot of young people in our industry experience, is that exact same scenario. And I do think it's gotten better throughout the years. I think we're
Hmm.
getting a little bit more professional at some level, but I know I hear it directly from techs that go in and they have a very similar experience. And, that's kind of their onboarding process. They don't really know anything
Right,
else that other than to just get screamed at right away.
right. Yeah, it was like, you know, you go in, I guess you pay your dues as a lube tech, changing oil. How many can you do of those a day? And, um, just even though I was a lube tech, I still wanted to learn. Like I just came out of college, but I had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So, um, so I hung around the master techs as much as I could. It's not this just like, hey, I start here and I get plugged in and everything's good to go. You have to make friends and you have to be relatable. You can't just show up as a know-it-all or be annoying. You have to, there's more to surviving in that shop than just knowing how to fix something.
Yeah.
So,
There is. And I think that's something that you learn as you get into the industry, is that inner culture in a shop. And I know whether it's the podcast or anything else we do content wise through Wrenchway, we talk about culture a lot because it is
mhm,
really, really important. And I think it's something that a lot of shop managers almost think is secondary, right? A lot of
mhm,
managers have that same mentality of, your job is to get work out as fast as possible and as quality, a quality of job as possible. And it is a business. You have to have that element. That's got to be a priority, is the
right,
profitability of the shop. But that inner workings of culture, I think, is a huge contributor to whether a young technician makes it or not, right? When you're
mhm,
getting into that shop, and if your very first thing is you're kind of scared of everybody because you just saw the service manager yell at everybody, and you really don't know who to talk to, because even those experienced technicians are probably a little rattled from being yelled at. It's just not a great first impression of our industry, is it?
no, it wasn't, but I wanted to be in it. So,
You really did. You really
mhm,
did. So, I talk to me about the progression from then there on out, right? Like, so you walk in with your little toolbox,
mhm.
and you're trying to make friends in the shop, assuming you were able to kind of gain some acquaintances or friends within the shop.
Hmm.
How did you grow from there? I mean, was it easy from there, or was it really hard?
Well, that first several months, just as a lube tech, you're just kind of learning the process and how cars move in and out of the shop. Like, what's the flow? So, um, I ended up transitioning to another shop and kind of had to start all the way back over, with meeting people and making friends and that kind of thing. But it was a recommendation from the master tech at the other shop, so I had a little bit of connection there. So we went there and, um, kind of the same process. Let me hang around. Let me watch how you're doing this timing belt or this brake job or that kind of thing. And then, this was at a dealership. So start asking about, when can you send me to school? When can you send me to OEM training? And that OEM training really made a difference for me, because like I remember seeing techs in the shop that they would diagnose a check engine light, and I just thought that was the most mystical thing that I'd ever seen. It was very overwhelming to think, wow, you took a light and a code and a process, and you fix something out of that. So it's not quite so mystifying now, but I still see it in young tech's eyes that, that's overwhelming. But anyway, from there, I went to a small, like mom and pop family owned shop. There was an A tech, a B tech, and a C tech, and then the owners. So we weren't paid flat rate there. So that was kind of a cool setup because everything was very team based. You just worked with each other to make sure the work got out, because that was the most important thing. So there was a lot of kind of thrown in the deep end learning on that, going from a dealership to we just work on everything. And, a small shop like that is, most of the cars you're seeing are 90,000 miles and up. So everything is broken and everything is old and worn out. So, lots of hands-on, greasy, dirty experience, but, you learn there. I went back to a dealership, and from there I got some more advanced diagnostic training on engine controls and scan tool usage and evap systems. And that really made a difference from, maybe it was imposter syndrome. Like, what am I even doing here? But even still, that was 5 years in before I felt like, okay, maybe I belong here. So I think that's a long learning curve to feel like you can be part of something.
It is.
But that training, which that shop also was connections I had made from the prior shops. So I don't think any job that I ever worked at was, hey, this is a brand new group of people. That was still based off those relationships from the very first day at shop number one. And then after that, I went to work for CarMax and worked there 8 years doing used cars, which is a different thing altogether. And then I came here to Greenville Tech.
I want to talk about something you said there, because I think it's important to point out one of the benefits that you've had throughout your career is that you've been able to see different styles of shops, different kinds of shops, the dealership, the independent, more of the big franchise or the big public company that you're working for. How important is it for you to now be able to share that knowledge with your students of the different types of shops? And the reason I ask is I think in a lot of cases, that young student that is looking at coming into a shop, they're just going to look at paycheck. They're just going to look at what they're going to get paid. But if they could just take a step back and think about what shop is going to be the best for my personality, which one is going to be the best for, helping get me educated so that I am a really, really good tech. In your experience and being able to see these different shops, I have to imagine that's kind of powerful to be able to explain to a young person what they're getting into when they go into a specific style of shop.
Yeah. So the way I look at that is, every shop, like every tech or every student, has got their own personality. And then when you take a group of individuals and put them together, that group, whether it's a class or whether it's a shop, they all develop their own tiny culture and personality. So every tech is not going to be the right fit for every shop. There's certain manufacturers that I would prefer less to work for, or there are certain ones I would rather work for, just because of, this is the way I think about things or processes, or this is how I want to manage culture, or what's essential or important to me. So, so if I can stress to, young techs coming in, or students, or, even seasoned techs who are already working, like every shop is not going to be the right fit. But if you can find the right fit for, tech and owner and foreman, and, then that can make for a great work environment and keep you engaged and want to keep working there. But if you're coming into something that you don't feel like is a good fit, and the culture is toxic and everyone just complains all day long, that's not a recipe to keep you there. or to be
I think
successful while you are there.
Yeah, I think something students make a mistake on is, and even experienced technicians for that matter, is not doing the research on the shop they're going to go work
Hmm.
for, and knowing that that decision you're about to make to go to a different place to work has a huge impact on your happiness and
Hmm.
on your just quality of life, right? If you're miserable going to work every single day, and it's because you didn't do the due diligence, you didn't do the research on the shop to understand what it is that you're signing up for, you're signing yourself up for maybe some potentially very scary things because you
Right.
you don't know what you're signing up for.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can, I mean, as much as you want the job and you want to go in and interview well, there's also an element of, well, you need to interview the employer as well. Can I see the shop? Can I talk to the techs? And that kind of thing. Just like can you get a vibe for what it's like here in this tiny little frame of space where you're visiting?
I think it's important to know that just like there's good techs and bad techs, there's good shops and bad shops, right? And
That's
you
true.
talked about that and how different the culture is per shop. And I've worked in groups that we have a bunch of different shops under the same umbrella.
Hmm.
And the way that I explain it to people is that the cultures in those different locations couldn't have been more different, even though the name on the building said the same thing.
Hmm.
The cultures in those shops, and even the business as a whole, the salespeople, the parts people, everybody, it was a different feel in every dealership that you went into. And I don't think people understand that. And especially like I go back to my time when I was a young technician, I just assumed they were all kind of exactly the same because they were under the same umbrella. And then when you actually get into it, you're like, oh no, they do have their own culture. They do have their own
Yep.
personality.
Yep. Everyone brings their background and experiences with them, and that comes out in relationships and behavior, and the way they write things up or don't write things up. So
Yeah.
it sure does.
Talk talk to me a little bit about maybe shops that have done a really good job at bringing in those entry level techs, right? We talked
Hmm.
about your experience and maybe how negative that experience was. Have you seen some shops do a good job in that area?
Yeah, I've seen, whether it's some students we have, or different apprentices that I've seen come in. Um, if you can get if you can get a new student or a new apprentice coming in and working with a mentor, then that's really an ideal. Just to have a new person come in, brand new tech. Let's just throw them on the lube rack. They don't learn anything. They just it's all about go, 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 go. How many oil changes can we get out because they're waiting? And, we don't want people waiting because people get upset when they're waiting. So if you can eliminate, I mean, if you can get a new tech coming in, partnered with a mentor, and then the mentor freed up to where they can actually give that new tech attention instead of worrying about how their bottom line is being cut, then that's like a really good recipe. So we've seen students come in where they get partnered up with a transmission tech, and now they're doing really technical rebuilds and diagnostics that someone who is just doing oil changes is not getting. So that's a good scenario. Or I've seen where like a slow progression of a new tech coming in where you've got they come in, they just shadow, they watch how you do it, and then slowly a little bit more responsibility is given to that young tech. Say, okay, well, now you've watched me look over this car 100 times. Now you can do it. Show me how you do it. I'm just going to stand back and watch. So, and then you give them the test drive, not just, all right, we're doing a test drive, but with the mentor tech paying attention, what are you looking for on this test drive? Are you braking at the right times? Are you checking for alignment at the right, type of road? where it's, how's the road crown here? Is it flat? Is it stretched? Whatever. But just that good recipe of a good mentor for that young technician to like go under their wing. That's ideal, I would think.
I think it's more than ideal, right? Like I almost think it's an absolute necessity
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, and a reason why so many techs have a short tenure in this industry is because
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have the right mentorship and the right person. I love that example of what you used with, this is how you road test. And I go back to my experience starting off in a shop to where, I was asked to road test cars and maybe look for maybe those noises, listen for noises, see how the car's supposed to be driving. And I was joking around with my dad a while back, whose shop that I worked in growing up. And I said, did you know one of the hardest parts for me was because I grew up in a shop and I never had an actual nice vehicle until many, many years later. Because when you grow up in a shop, you kind of get the scraps of whatever's left,
Right.
and you have to make it work to get it out. I said, I honestly didn't know what to listen to. I didn't know because I drove pieces of junk all the time. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that clunk wasn't a natural noise,
Right.
or like it is crazy to me how much that mentorship and actually just guidance and just generally being around the shop and being comfortable being in the shop and being comfortable to ask questions about that type of thing, how much impact that can have to a young technician. Because if you don't have that comfort level and you don't have that ability to almost just be a little bit transparent, be a little bit, be able to ask those questions like that. Because I think when you're comfortable and just saying, hey, listen, I don't know if that noise is normal or not, or if
Mm-hmm.
you can just go to somebody and just kind of have that honest conversation, that could change somebody's career because of how accepting a person is in the shop.
Yeah, and that goes back to the culture too. So, if a new tech, whether they're inexperienced or let's say that they're, an experienced tech moving in from out of state, if they come to that shop and they are treated like an outsider or feel like an outsider, that's not going to be a good fit. So one of the things that I've tried to cultivate is, whoever's coming in the shop, um, maybe it's just because now I've been here in South Carolina for so long. We talk about Southern hospitality, right? So I don't think it's as strong as it used to be, but that's a different topic. um, but I heard someone say that hospitality is the art of inviting other people in. So if it's a new tech coming to the shop, hey, let me, you know, introduce myself. Let me introduce you to some other guys. Let me show you around. Has anyone given you a tour of what this place is? Places to avoid. Make sure don't talk
People
to
to
this.
avoid.
Yeah, don't talk to this person on this day because it's just not a good day for them. You know, kind of give them some street smarts about what's happening in the shop. You know, um, or just or if it's with students. I think there's a sense of, oh, you're a master technician, you're Superman, you never make mistakes, anything. So if I can kind of give some transparency, like, hey, maybe tell a story or two about how I've broke things, because I have broke things. I think you don't. That just seems to be part of it. Everybody breaks something, right?
Yeah.
So, but can you fix it from there? So maybe share some mistakes that I've made that will help someone feel welcome. Like, hey, I can be a part here. There's this place for me, and I can be comfortable asking those questions that maybe this is a stupid question, but I feel comfortable enough to ask it. So try to create that culture by doing that.
I think what you just said there is very powerful in that a lot of times that lead tech in a shop doesn't understand the impact that they're having on the lives of the other people in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, I was very similar to you in that when I was in the shop, that master tech was a legend in my mind, right? It
Hmm.
was over and above what the
Yep.
service manager was, what the owner was. Like that person was the man. And
Exactly.
I really looked up and aspired to be that person. And a lot of times they just make it look so easy,
Hmm.
what they've done, but that young person coming in doesn't know the story of how they got to where they're at. And a lot of times I think it's because that master tech or that really elite level tech doesn't do a very good job telling their story. And there's a lot of times where you get that technical in nature type of person,
Hmm.
maybe that they're at times maybe not the most personable or really not open to sharing their story on how they got to where they are.
Hmm.
Some are amazing. I've had some amazing mentors in shops in my life, but I feel like some of them, when they're just kind of, they want their own corner, they want to stay to themselves, they
Yep.
almost do themselves a disservice because there are a lot of people looking up to that person.
Hmm. Yeah. If there was some warmth to that, not that everything has to be touchy feely in the shop, but you can certainly. I mean, and there's banter and jokes and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you can bring somebody in with that instead of push them out, that would be pretty key, I think.
Technicians, have you checked out WrenchWay yet? WrenchWay is a free online community for automotive and diesel professionals. Whether you're looking for a job or not, WrenchWay makes it easy to explore new opportunities, stay up to date on what's going on in the automotive and diesel communities in your area, and helps improve and promote the technician profession. Check out all of the job details you care about before you apply or interview with WrenchWay Top Shops. Details like photos of the shop and answers to the questions you actually care about instead of the same old copy and paste job description you see everywhere else. Open to new job opportunities but don't want to apply yet? Create an anonymous reverse job post and let shops reach out to you and see what's going on with the industry in your area through WrenchWay's Shop Talk. Join the WrenchWay online community for free by visiting wrenchway.com or by downloading the WrenchWay mobile app. Link is in the show notes. How do you warm a new student that's entering the industry up to some of that shop culture, right? Because I think it can be kind of a
Oh,
splash of cold water on a young person's face when they walk into that and they hear that banter and they hear that back and forth. And,
hmm.
I think we've all been in shops where some of what you hear probably is not stuff that we could repeat on this podcast. And,
Right.
like being able to kind of get them to understand that, it is a little different than what you're learning here at school. Like there
Hmm.
is a little bit more of a real world experience when you get into a shop. It's different.
Yeah, and like you said, it's real world. Kids are coming out of high school, and there's certain behaviors and things that are okay in high school, and then we tell them, okay, you're in college now. This is different. Now, and it is different, but this is still just a bridge from high school to the real world. People can still get, they don't like how someone talked to them or whatever else. But when you go out into a shop, nobody's managing that. Nobody cares how you feel when I said whatever to you. So, just trying to brace them that, okay, yes, now grades count. You have to do the work, or it's not going to go well for you. um, so, but then also, there's a lot of students that are coming in and, they've seen movies and they like cars, but they don't know anything about them. They're coming in at ground zero. So, we've got an introductory class that's like, okay, these are shop tools. So, this is what a screwdriver is, and this is how to use it, and this is a ball peen hammer, and if you have a claw hammer in your toolbox, you need to throw it out because this isn't carpentry. And they go, what? So, and then we show them scan tools and voltmeters and several different variety of tools. And this is how to use a torque wrench, and this is which torque wrench you want to use, and you don't want to put that half-inch drive 2 foot long torque wrench on this 10 millimeter bolt because you're going to shear it off. And why is that? You have all these kinds of questions, but Starting out at that base level, with some who have automotive experience, it's kind of an easy thing for them. But regardless of what level of tool experience or automotive experience they have coming in, like if we can just encourage them to like, hey, stay teachable. You never know everything. And if you think that you know everything, that's a clear indicator that you don't.
Yeah.
So please
I,
listen to me.
and advice for that young person that's out there right now, if you're looking to get into this industry, that is the number one thing you're going to do that's going to blackball you and really put a kind of a cloud over your head in terms of what the others in the shop think of you,
Mm-hmm.
is that if you go into it and you're a know-it-all and and I think there's times where some of these young people don't even know that they're doing that, right? They don't
Mm-hmm.
know that they're being a know-it-all. So I think it takes being hyper self-aware of who you are, your response to somebody trying to give you guidance as a young person, be accepting, do what they tell you to do. If they
Right.
tell you to do something and you do something completely different, they're not going to be apt to come and give you advice again, right? If you're not
Right.
following their advice, they're going to kind of ignore you from
You're
then
done.
on. So you are, and that is something we see over and over and over again with young people, is that either know-it-all attitude or just maybe not listening. And I think if, regardless of what your tool knowledge is to start off with, or your knowledge of mechanical knowledge, like if you go in with a good attitude and you work hard and you want to do
Right.
well, you're going to have supporters in the shop. But if you go in
Right.
and maybe you do have a better mechanical knowledge than others in the class with you, but if you go in with a know-it-all attitude, you're essentially kind of walking yourself out of the industry.
Yeah, that's not good. Another one is showing up with somehow you were able to scrape together enough to get a $5,000 toolbox, and then you don't
Mm.
have anything in it, and you borrow everything. Like that's not a good look either.
It's a terrible look. I know my dad at our family shop let go of a kid who rolled in with a Maximizer toolbox and had a basic set of screwdrivers and like a socket set, and that was it. And
Yeah.
so he unloaded the toolbox, started going through his drawers, and there was nothing in the drawers. And my dad told him to load it back up and go home, because
Adios.
yeah, well, I think it was just to him, it was speaking to him and saying, okay, you don't know how to prioritize things yet. You're not at the level where you can be in our shop yet. And
Hmm.
I think for that young person out there, there's nothing wrong with a Harbor Freight box, or there's nothing
No.
wrong with a Craftsman box to get you started, or secondhand from Marketplace, right? There's always deals out there. Like, just be smart about it and invest in the tools that are actually going to make you some money, not the box
Right.
that's going to store them.
Yeah, and don't look at the box as a status symbol either,
No.
because the level of work you do is going to be your status, not how big of a toolbox you have. So I once worked with a guy and he said, my philosophy is that the bigger the toolbox, the bigger the idiot. So no, but he did go out to buy a big giant toolbox, and I was like, hey guy.
Hey, hey, you big idiot.
So I don't know.
I think there's times where you see that experienced tech and they've earned the right to have that big toolbox, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're that young person and you don't have even close to enough tools to fill it up, like that's when it looks stupid, right? Is
It
when
does.
you have that gigantic toolbox with nothing to put in it. I think that's where you end up seeing that toolbox on Marketplace for half off of what they bought it for. It's just not a good investment.
Yeah, there's plenty of things to look stupid for, so we don't need to let the toolbox be one of them.
Well, it's interesting. And I love the fact that you've still, you're still young enough to where you've got that perspective of what it's like for a new technician coming in, but now you're
Hmm.
working with these young people
Hmm.
every day, right?
Right.
What advice do you have for them when they're getting into the industry over and above what we've already talked about? Because it is something that can consume you. It can eat you up and spit you out, especially if you're not with the right type of shop.
Hmm.
But what can they do to ensure that they're successful in this business?
So like just kind of understanding how industry works is a huge thing. Like, we've talked about tools. We've talked about, you don't know everything. Um, But, understanding how flat rate works is a big part of that too. So, I mean, and flat rate's a hot topic depending on, there's people all over the map on what they feel about it. But if they can understand how flat rate works, that's one, that's a big barrier to get over. And that, you know, yes, you have to be efficient, but you still have to fix these things. But if we can encourage them, like, your speed will come. If you do something 100 times, you're going to get faster at it. But don't think that you're going to start beating time day one. Like every time, especially working independent, you almost have to go into the mindset of like, oh, this is the first time I've ever done this. It's going to eat my lunch. But the next time, probably not.
It's hard to keep that confidence level though, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you were when you were first starting off as a technician, but even though I was starting off not flat rate, I still knew what the time was given to do the job, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
was aware of what that was. And then when like you look at the clock and you're not even barely getting started and the job was supposed to be done by now,
Yeah.
and I mean, it is really hard to keep your head up. And I think that's still kind of a fresh wound from 20 years ago for me of, just looking at it and how you're judged on every single job and
Right.
how like, not even from like a management perspective, but the pressure you put on yourself to get to that number. And when you don't do that and you don't meet that number and say it happens 2 times in a row, 3 times in a row,
Mm-hmm.
4 times in a row, you just keep hanging your head and hanging your head. And it's hard to stay positive.
Yeah. Um, yeah. It's tough on that. I always set myself a goal of like, all right, this is how many hours I want to turn a day, and you know, a- after having been in industry long enough, and you start doing certain jobs over and over, whether that's independent or OEM like dealership, you start getting a sense of how long this takes. So, once you can start seeing in your mind, okay, I have this job coming. I'm probably going to need these tools. So, I can pick out my tools before I even start the job because I know that's what it needs. It's just the repetition and the patience and I hope there's got to be some stick to itiveness too. This job will help you build grit.
Yeah, well, yeah, well, and I think there's some level of peer pressure there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I recall going to like tech school, and I remember a conversation, and it feels like it was yesterday, where the conversation went something like, "Oh, you take 45 minutes to an oil change, like I do it in 20 minutes,"
Mm-hmm.
and the kid doing it in 20 minutes is bragging about doing it in 20 minutes, but probably didn't do an actual like good job on the oil change or didn't do an inspection. There's a lot more that goes into it, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
apples to apples. But I do remember thinking like, all right, 20 minutes, like, what are you doing? Like you are literally just changing the oil. You're not doing anything else, and you're not doing
Yeah.
a very good job at it.
Yeah, like do you even have skid plates to take down or, and then also getting them to, talk about how long does something take. Um, let's get technicians looking at, all right, well, what does this job pay? Whether you use all data or you have some kind of shop standard that you go by, know what those jobs pay. So, um, you know, if maybe you do get those oil changes that take forever because they you've got these big metal skid plates on that you have to take down, or extra panels, or you've got a cartridge filter that you have to drain first, and you need to make sure that it doesn't get on the undershield because it's a luxury vehicle and their driveway costs more than you make in a year, or so. Don't mess it up. But you know, um, yeah. So knowing those flat rate times, not just like how much is it? Am I going to get paid for this? But setting yourself an expectation of um, how long should this take, even if the time is different. Like maybe you just know, okay, well, I know I'm only getting paid 3 or 4 tenths for this oil change, and it's going to take a lot longer than that. But how do I still do this job efficiently? You find
Yeah.
ways. And then also you've got those relationships that hopefully you've built in the shop that you can go to them and say, hey, is there any way I can speed this up, or do I just have to eat it?
Yeah. Yeah. And learning the right way to do it. But I also think, we talked about culture before, but that's so much of the leadership in the shop
Mm-hmm.
actually driving that culture. And I do think that's really, really important that that leader sets the tone for how the rest of the shop is going to interact. And
Mm-hmm.
granted, you're going to have some people that just don't like talking to other people. They're not
Right.
going to be very helpful in mentorship, but they're probably amazing techs and they're really, really good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I think the importance is finding that one person in the shop that does kind of go over and above to accommodate that young person and help them feel comfortable, and knowing that that's value that goes over and above what their production is, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think so many shops judge a tech simply on the output that they have, the hours that they're putting out, but there's
Right.
some that just bring other things to the table that you can't measure.
Yeah, I've had a couple really good managers, um, and you know, it seems to be like the common thing of all of them was they believed in me when I didn't, because there's always those days that was like I need to get out of this. Like I had several days of self doubt, and they would come along, and one manager, I knew that he had my back even if he was wrong about it. Even if I was in the wrong, I knew he still had my back for everyone else. So he would always go to bat for his team, and that goes a long ways. And it was leadership in the shop. And then there was another manager I had who, like, I just had a lot of stuff going on personally. There was chronic illness in the house. I had kids that were sick, and this went on for a long time. And like I was pursuing some different leadership elements, and life had just kind of beaten me down, and I didn't want to pursue anything anymore, honestly. Um, but he saw in me, he's like, I think you can do this. And he pushed me, and he's like, I believe in you to do this. And he kept putting me in those situations where I would have to do that. Um, and he made a huge difference for me. So both of those guys really gave me some confidence to think, man, maybe I could teach.
Yeah. And
So
do you feel like you've now taken that to where you can do that with your students, where you can be that positive influence and push them out of their comfort zone a little bit?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Some I feel like maybe I need to be meaner with, but guys get browbeat all the time and about how they need to step up, and some do need to hear that, but some that beats down even further. So trying to, you know, knowing that every person, whether it's in shop or whether it's in my classroom, like I can't treat every person the same. So how do I be dynamic and have a different approach to every person? Like those are the kind of challenges I'm looking at now.
Yeah. And I think that's an important aspect to remember, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
different personalities, different motivating factors, not just for young people, but for people as a whole, right? People are motivated by different things. They get up
Right.
in the morning for different things. And I think knowing that you can tailor that to their personality a little bit better.
Yeah. It's like, some are motivated by goals. Like I hit my 10 hours today, or some are motivated by affirmation and getting an attaboy, or some could care less about getting an attaboy. They just want to be left alone and work.
I
So,
I use that example, and I've used it in the past where I had a technician, and I was always huge on public recognition, right?
mm-hmm.
Of recognizing somebody for doing a great job in front of a group of people. And I did it to a technician one day, and the technician had just done something that was amazing, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was so cool. And so in our kind of team huddle, team meetup, I publicly acknowledged him in this meeting, and he kind of waved at the meeting, and then after the meeting was done, I was back in my office, and he came in. He's like, "Don't ever do that again." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "I hate that. I hate being like the center of attention. I hate
Mm-hmm.
being in the middle of that." And that was very embarrassing to me. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" That was a light bulb moment of like, "Oh shoot, I should really really make sure when I'm doing something like that that I check ahead and make sure that it's cool."
Yeah, because I've read several things. If someone does something good, praise them in front of everybody. If someone does something that needs correction, then you pull them aside and you do it, you know, um, just individually. But right, everybody's different. So now their peers will call them out negatively in front of everybody, and, and then that's part of that culture and dynamic, and
It is.
hopefully that'll self correct.
If you're enjoying Beyond the Wrench, remember to follow and rate our podcast to help support the show. Right now, we would like to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Sonic Tools. Sonic Tools' direct distribution model offers affordable prices without sacrificing quality and service. Their goal is to increase the efficiency of every technician with the equipment solutions and the Sonic foam system that organizes quality tools in ways that award every technician with the opportunity to excel. Visit sonictoolsusa.com to learn more. So we've got currently across the nation a very large shortage of instructors,
Mm-hmm.
both at the high school and post-secondary level. I want to pick your brain for a few minutes here on why it was attractive to you to go to the education side. What was it about the education side that was appealing to you? And was it something where you've got to want to do it because maybe you're going to have to sacrifice some level of pay,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to have to sacrifice something to do that education side? What was the driving factor of you going to the education side?
Well, when I was coming through the program, because my education, I don't remember if I said this at the beginning, but I came to Greenville Tech for my automotive education, not knowing anything. So I came from a graphic design background and said, no, I'm going to work on cars. But and now I'm teaching it, so it's a little bit surreal. But one of my instructors here, when I was coming through class, he said, keep it in the back of your mind to maybe come back here and teach one day. And I was like, yeah, right, okay. So, then I went in, how do I get fast? How do I work on things? And how do I have some confidence in this field? But that manager I mentioned who saw something in me when I couldn't see it myself, one of the things that he did, the situations he put me in, was mentoring. So we say, all right, we have new technicians coming in the shop. They're apprentices. They don't have much experience, or they're doing onboarding. He put me as our team mentor. So that got me off of flat rate, and so I didn't have to worry about turning hours, but I could just focus on, hey, how do I help bring this tech up? And a couple of them probably not super, and then one of the apprentices I had, he came from. We finally talked him from behind the parts counter to come out and get on the line working on cars, and he just took off. And I'm so proud of him, and having that sense of like, man, I just loved building this guy up. So it became pretty apparent to me that one of my motivations was like, I really like the mentor aspect. I like helping other people succeed. It's not my attaboy. It's not, man, I was able to turn 70 hours this week, hit that number for me. It was just, how can I lift other people up? So that was over and over. I saw that. And then I had another tech that I worked with. He came over here a few years prior to me, and when he left, the job we were at together, I told him, hey, if they ever have an opening, let me know. So he called me up a couple of years ago and said, hey, we've got an opening. So I'm like, okay. So I go through the motions, go through the interview process, have the discussions, and they're like, oh, it's going to be a huge bite in pay. I'm like, oh, great. I don't need this. So it was really, weighing, okay, well, what is this? How is working on the cars, affecting me? What's the schedule like versus what's the schedule here? What's the benefits? But what's the job satisfaction? Because the drive for me was never, man, I just love cars and I love, I was never like an eat, sleep, and breathe cars.
Right.
But I did find out like I was passionate about the people. So I really wanted to, I knew that was going to be like, I could do this. So, and then learning how to transmit technical information from my head out to a class, that's a whole nother thing that, and I'm still working on that, but on how to make that more efficient and better. But I knew that like job satisfaction, life satisfaction, I like what I do more than I think I've ever done. Even though I was able to turn hours and I was efficient and made a good living. Like my wife has been a stay-at-home mom for several years and we've got 4 kids. So, it worked out. But I knew that I would be better going home if I liked more what I was doing at my job. Even if it paid less, it was going to be a better situation all around. We would figure the money side out, and we did, but you have to look at it. It's more than just money. You've got resources of, yes, time is money's a resource, but time is a resource. My health is a resource. Energy is a resource. Your relationships are a resource. Like it's not all money. So ultimately, what's the biggest net here? So
yeah, that's good advice in general. One of the things that comes along with trying to grow a program is trying to get that industry involvement. One of the frustrations that I hear from a lot of schools is that we see a couple people or a couple different businesses that are well represented at our advisory committee meetings and that show up, with donuts occasionally and really care about the program, but we're largely ignored by a good portion of the industry as a whole. Is that something that you experience, or maybe do you see a little bit more support than most?
well, when I came in, I knew there was an advisory board in place, but I didn't really know them. So it's like, okay, well, here's this advisory board and industry partnerships, and they're here, but they're not mine, So one of the things that I've been doing is just trying to go out and, like the relationships again, how do I meet these people? And there's a ton of shops in the area. There's more than I can physically get to, but I'm open, and anyone who wants to come talk to me, then, I'm happy to, come in, I'll give you a tour, I'll come see your shop, and like with the fit, every shop is going to be a different fit for every student. So can I find the right fits? But that really puts me and anyone that's helping me in that position of, we have to be out. We can't just sit here in our offices and do nothing. Like we have to build the relationships, just kind of like, like we do when we first go into a shop, but except now my shop is the county.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're on point there, because I think where a lot of instructors go wrong is that they either kind of have that shield where they want their moat around them, right? Where they want to keep the program close to the vest, and they're not open to bringing in industry, or it's just a lot more work to bring in those industry partners. But I think what I see in the best programs throughout the country consistently is that they're actively engaged with their advisory committee, with
Mm-hmm.
shops in the area. They're generating interest in the program. And that helps in so many different ways, because if you need something and maybe you have to go to the administration to ask for something, or you have to give some level of community outreach or awareness and recruiting into your program,
Mm-hmm.
industry can be such a great resource for all of you instructors that are out there, that it needs to be a priority within your programs. It can't just be a secondary thing. I'm here to teach
Right.
and that's all I'm going to do. The best programs in the nation are the ones that are actively getting those shops in the area involved, making them feel like they're a part of the school. And when you do that, that's when you get that support, and it comes in hordes, and it's so fun to see. And that gives you a backbone when you have to go into some of those tough administrative meetings and meet with your dean and talk about, we need to add budget for this. And if you go into that meeting and you don't have good enrollment, or you don't
Mm-hmm.
have good industry support, it is very easy for administration to steamroll you and not allow you to
Mm-hmm.
grow the program, because we run expensive programs and oftentimes are looked at just like technicians are a lot of times, right? We're in the
Mm-hmm.
back of house, and we're going to ignore those people until they make enough noise to where we actually have to go listen to them. So, I hate to get on my soapbox there, but for you instructors that are listening, I cannot I cannot overstate the importance of getting industry involved.
Mm-hmm. And this goes for new techs coming into a new shop as well, but as much as it applies to me in with industry partners, that like you have to bring value to your employer. It can't just
Mm-hmm.
be about what's in it for me. I mean, yes, do I need advisory board participation? I do, but that can't be the sole focus of what I'm doing. Like I have to, you know, whether it's a shop in the county, whether it's a new apprentice technician, whether it's someone coming in, whether it's a student, whether it's a fellow faculty member, like I have to want them to succeed, right? It can't just be about me and look how great I've done. Again, I'm not in for the attaboys, but how can I bring value to my employer? How can I bring value to my advisory board? How can I bring value to my students and techs? I mean, yes, there are things I need, but I think if I'm bringing value to the people around me, giving them that hospitality, I mean, invite them in, let's have those conversations. How do I make you successful? I think that my success will take care of itself.
That's
That's
great advice in general. I mean, that you're right. If the more people you can help make successful, the more successful you're going to be. I've lived by that forever. I truly believe in that. And it's just a
mm-hmm.
more fun way of living, right? And
Right.
if you're helping those shops around you be more successful, and you're actually opening those lines of communication, and of course, the shops have to be reciprocal too, right? The shops
Mm-hmm.
have to show up to help support the program. That's something I'm really passionate about, is what do we have to do to collectively get these shops actively involved with the program, so we're not just asking for your best graduate come graduation time, right? Like, we want
Right.
them to actively have a role in your program and help give you guidance as to what type of technician they're wanting from you too.
Yeah, it's like, you can't, speaking for a young technician going in, you have to make your employer more money than they're paying you. You can't ask for 3 hours of diag because you're not good at it yet.
That's a good
you
point.
know, I mean, it would be nice, but reality is depending. It varies on shop. You may get 3/10, you may get half an hour, you may get an hour of diag, but you have to make them more money. You have to bring more value to them than you are getting from them. So, yeah, how do we make them succeed?
Well, I think that piece right there too, shops that are listening to this, the more you can actually go in and walk through a financial statement with those techs, show them the business, and don't leave the curtain up, because a lot of times that just drives assumptions as to what you're doing with that money. Right. And a lot of times they'll say, hey, your shop is charging, our shop is charging $150 an hour. I'm getting paid 20. What in the heck is going on here?
Right.
And not knowing that, hey, you know what? Our electric bill is $2,000 a month. There's so much overhead and so much other so many other elements that go into this, that a lot of times, not even just young technicians, most technicians don't understand. And it's because the businesses haven't done a good enough job explaining it. So I do think there's a huge opportunity there. When you're bringing somebody in to talk to the class at some point, I think it would be a fantastic idea to bring somebody in to explain that, right? If you get one of your industry partners to come in and say, okay, guys, this is how a business runs. This is how a shop runs. This is how a shop is profitable. And the profit is needed to get you those tools you want, to get you the facilities, to make sure that the lights stay on and they're nice and bright, to help you see what you're working on. There's just so much more that goes into it. And I feel like industry and schools could work together to better explain that.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because I've heard the exact same thing, that you charge this much per hour and we get this. Where does it go?
That sounds like a
But
great opportunity. I think we've got to get somebody to Greenville Technical College to talk about that. I think that'd be an excellent opportunity.
yeah, I'm sure someone might.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. I really respect what you've done in your career, and the fact that you're in education now and very happy with what you're doing. I think you're building a powerhouse of a program down there, and just wish you nothing but the best of luck in the future.
Well, I appreciate it, Jay. Thanks for having me on. It's been good to talk with you.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners, managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.